Hello and welcome to Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora, and on this week's episode, what I would like to speak about is the concept of ascension, and really define that and define or describe what I expect that would look like from the experiencer's viewpoint and also from the outsider's viewpoint. So I'd like to bring up this distinction because let's say if you had a very dear friend and if you died or your dear friend died. I would draw all of this for you. If you were simply with me in my studio, I would draw all of this, and I think it would be a lot easier to understand in the graphic representation of overlapping time fields. But basically, welcome. If you are a returning listener, a returning long-time listener, thank you so much for tuning in each week. And I'm going to talk about the time vortex, so you're already primed and familiar with this concept. And if you are a first-time listener, hello and welcome. I paint and draw these pictures that are not merely abstract or capricious designs that are whatever, pleasing to the eye or nice and pretty. They are really a higher dimensional language of vibration, and it's meant to be a bridge between beings like us that are moving at one particular rate and in one particular direction, and beings that might be moving in a very different direction and, moving internally. The object of their body might be moving at a very different speed than we are, and how we can possibly find a common ground in order to communicate. So that's what this whole language is. I am not the inventor of this language. I cannot pretend to take credit for something that is so vast. Perhaps if I dilate my identity to be the divine, and I could say, yes, I am one with the divine, then I could say, yes, I invented this language. However, in my present, limited, individuated incarnation as Aurora, I cannot say that I invented this language accurately. What I can say is that I perceive this language, and I perceive it using the aperture of my higher faculties. And these higher faculties are all of the energy centers or chakras. That's what chakra just means, spinning wheel or energy center, that sit on the foundation of unconditional love. And unconditional love exists at the center of our chest. And so there's like the basic physical aspects of self that we are all highly aware of: the physical body, physical form, mammalian emotions, and those are the lower, denser emotions: anger, sadness, jealousy, possessiveness, attraction, affection, romantic desire. Those are all of those emotions. And then on top of that, a little bit of cerebral cortex, and that's the human daily waking conscious intellect. And that's like the first three rungs of the ladder, or the basis of the pyramid, the foundation of the various levels of density of who and what you are. And so, human self-image, self-identity has been just those basic three levels for a very long time. I would say even throughout recorded human history. However, that's not the intention. The intention is for each one of us to claim the entire ladder of consciousness, or the entire pyramid of consciousness that goes all the way up to the top of our head, and that pinnacle, which is our connection to the divine. So on top of your conscious waking intellect is the next level of development, and that is the heart, unconditional love. And we need to cultivate unconditional love and climb the ladder just to get to that basic balancing point in order to be prepared to activate the higher faculties. And this is what so many different schools of meditation or meditation technologies are all about. When I say technology, I'm talking about like a formalized system, not necessarily that you use microchips to meditate better, but that the understanding that there might be visualizations or chanting or toning or mantra or whatever is utilized in order to amplify the natural meditation, that all of those techniques are utilized just to get the body up to speed to that basic balance point. And unconditional love is a tone. I'm not in my piano, but if I were, I would make a little tone here. I'll do it with this Tibetan bowl over here, a tone. Just like we have struck this resonant instrument and it is making a tone, when your heart, it's like the central processing unit of the computer of who and what you are, when that central portion of self is in tune with the rest of the cosmos. And when you are not grasping at the future or clinging to the past, and you are moving through time at exactly the right rate of consciousness, like Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man eating the white dots of energy at exactly the right rate, we create a tone with our heart that is called unconditional love. And that tone is not only, first of all, it's the gas or the currency or the energy that makes everything function at the higher dimensional level of economy and consciousness. So, brief pause, one moment. In this time and place, in this social and cultural matrix, what makes everything happen is money. However, in a higher dimensional social and economic and cultural matrix, what makes everything happen is this unconditional love tone, which is a form of energetic currency. So again, if this is a new broadcast for you and you're just learning about me for the first time, I often introduce myself. I am a galactic walk-in. People say, where are you from? I say, I'm not from a place, a location in space that you can, point to with your finger in the night sky. I'm from a collective of consciousness. We have a values system, and part of that value system is unconditional love is the fuel, and it is what makes us able to transport our consciousness from one place or dimension to another place. It's like the gas that makes the car go. And so we are like a living organism, not a clank metal vessel at all, but a collective of consciousnesses who are all there voluntarily or willingly. No one is there, as some kind of slave or captive. And we all work together like the way a body has organs and cells and energy centers that all work together. And if you perceived my collective as it was traveling, through space and time and consciousness, you would perceive like a giant polygon, a shape that has different colors on it, that is emitting sounds and is vibrating at different frequencies. And so it does not necessarily look like a person with a face and 2 arms and 2 legs or something like that, because that is often what is used in order to signify a living organic being, yet my collective is an organism. And to be a part of this collective as it, travels from star system to star system, you have to audition, and like being in advanced jazz band. It's not just for any musician. You actually have to be able to be musically literate, meaning you can read the score of the cosmos, you can see time, you can see what is the next note that needs to be played, and you are also sensitive to the playing of others, that you recognize that your vibrations that you're emitting are affecting others and you're being affected by their vibrations, and it takes a real expert with great perception and sensitivity to be able to do that give and take in a way that we would call music as opposed to noise. And all of this is happening on the level of not just music or what you say with your voice, but also the thought emissions that you put forth with your consciousness, what you think, and what you feel. So like really good musicians, when they're playing, they're not just playing a note, they're also emoting. They're putting feeling and emotion and passion into that note. And that is what this collective of consciousness is really all about. So it is a very large, traveling dance party of musicians and visual artists and feeling. It's also all about feeling. And it is a wonderful collaborative art project. There's hardly anything comparable in terms of intensity of experience and being able to drop one's boundaries in a healthy way with others. Because this collective, I also characterize it. I say it's not like a fascist state or a hive mind, the negative mentality that many Earth surface humans have, because there's so much totalitarianism and loss of personal freedom down here. I understand the cultural filter through which you are perceiving what I'm speaking about. So I'm not speaking about some kind of communist or socialist nightmare where, you give up all your own freedom and all your own individuality and everything you are to the state, and then the state, dictates your life to you. Like, no, that's horrible. It's not about that, because unconditional love is one part of our values system, my value system, And another big part of it is freedom. And freedom is a foundation value, and it's freedom for everyone, not just freedom for one elite sector. So that means that part of the motivation for our moving collective dance party through all of these different layers of reality is to increase unconditional love and to increase freedom. Because if any portion of consciousness is enslaved anywhere, it decreases the value of the overall tone of the music that is being played by consciousness everywhere. Because all consciousness is actually related and connected and interactive. And this is the great, like what we start to learn about responsibility. So I'll speak a little bit also about non-duality and the invention of the flying rainbow lasagna. I didn't invent that whole language of vibration that I'm describing that is in my artwork, in the visual artwork and sculptures that I make. What I did do is perceive it through my aperture of my higher consciousness, the forehead chakra and the connection to the divine at the top of my head. And I, share it with others as, perfectly as I can. I draw and paint these paintings as perfectly as I can. And that's like the backstory to understand the flying rainbow lasagna, which is the next highest dimensional shape of this arrangement of nested tori or donut shapes. So your chakras or energy centers are ordinarily shaped like donuts or torus or toroidal shape. And they are nested according to a proportion that I did not invent. It's like the laws of physics. I'm not inventing them. They are part of the fabric of reality and what is part of like the greater cosmic musical score of the cosmos, composer of the cosmos, great creator. It's created on that level. Well, I took those basic chakra shapes, which are also evident in the level of supercoiling of DNA. When you begin to take a strand of DNA and twist it and add energy to it in this twisting motion, eventually it supercoils and it begins to make up these stacked up tori or donut shapes. In any place where you have a donut or torus, you can add an additional dimension and add an additional degree of freedom, vibrate it in a higher dimensional space, and basically allow for greater freedom of movement. Just like if you're not a two-dimensional animal stuck to the surface of a flat plane, like a little insect, if you're a three-dimensional animal that has wings that can fly off the surface of the flat plane, you can do more fun and interesting things than the two-dimensional animal. So if you are a toroidally shaped energy field, you are more limited than if you are shaped like a flying rainbow lasagna. The flying rainbow lasagna is what happens when you get those wings or get to that next level of energetic advancement. Or it is analogous to going from like the pupal form in insect development, the pupae, in its little chrysalis, you get to the adult winged form. And this is it's all very fun and exciting. It's the being is changing state. So this is a good segue into ascension and what this is. It is not to be confused with a biblical literalist interpretation, what is known as the Christian rapture. So when I speak about the Christ chakra, this is the chakra on your forehead that allows you to perceive time or to perceive the musical structure of the cosmos. Read the music of the cosmos. It doesn't mean that you have to be a Christian in order to do this. I wear a cross necklace so that I'm reclaiming that symbol from, the biblical literalist Christians who do have an elitist viewpoint, who say, no, only a certain sector of society is allowed to do this or be this or go to this place or have this experience. No, I'm all about saying this is open source code. I didn't invent the Christ chakra. I invented the flying rainbow lasagna. So I'm just making these distinctions here. So the Christ is real. Christ consciousness is a very real mental presence. And right now on this planet, there are all of these false stories that are going around that are about what Christ is and what it means when you achieve Christ consciousness. And it's all very unhealthy, in my opinion. It's like saying you have a heart in your body, but you can have a heart disease that makes the heart not pump effectively. And I'm seeing in this world, in this sociology, that's what's going on with the Christ level. Christ is supposed to be like our connection to the abstract, that we are human-shaped beings, not abstractions. In abstraction, so this is like in fine art, the difference between representational art and abstract art has everything to do with the human filter. Something that is representational is something that on the human or anthropomorphic level we would recognize with our system of interpretation. So representational art would be a bowl of fruit, or a face, a humanoid figure, a shoe, a landscape, whatever you would see and recognize through the portal or lens or viewpoint of being a human. And an abstract piece of artwork would be something that is beyond that level of system of interpretation. So it would be a collection of colors or textures or shapes or polygons or lines that do not represent something that we perceive with our five senses in the human realm. So this is also the difference between the different levels of conscious awareness. We have our human mind, that level of mentality or conception that happens when we are perceiving through our human filter. When we're perceiving through our human filter, everything that's non-human is other. Like I'm looking at a redwood tree out my window right now, it is other to me because we're moving at a different time scale. Like that being could live for thousands of years. You know, I'm lucky if I'm going to live for more than 100 years. We have a different rate of metabolism. We have a different rate of perception. So it's like me trying to have a conversation with a fruit fly that only lives for 3 days. We are living on vastly different time scales. So in order to be able to relate to these organisms or energy structures that have very different time scales and, you know, scales of identity, we need to change our filter of consciousness. It's like tuning your guitar. And if you tune your guitar in a different way, then you can be like, this tree is the same as me. There's no difference. And you and tree would be same as opposed to you and tree appearing to be other. And what that usually means is you get to the level of the abstract, transcending the human level of interpretation and connecting directly to raw data. That's what I'm speaking about. So you move up one rung of the ladder from the forehead to the very top of your head. And that level, the crown, where one connects to the cosmos or to higher dimensional consciousness, that is a level of pure energy that is not being interpreted. So if I send you a word, you know, like the word shoe, you are going to interpret that word through your whole filter of interpretation and what it means and what its significance is. It's not the same as if I were to send you the unadorned concept of footwear or, you know, an image of my shoe that's sitting right here on my floor next to me. I'm sending you something that has some amount of wiggle room. Like if I say the word shoe to you, you might interpret it one way. You might think I'm saying this, think I'm saying that. This is the Tower of Babel. This is the whole idea of human verbalized language structure and how it can mean many different things. And how if you're just looking at the surface or the veneer of what a word means, it's so easy to be misled or to misinterpret what is being said. This is the difficulty with communicating via emails or these little text chats where there's very little nuance. You can't really tell if someone writes something like, oh yes, that would be great. You're like, is that sarcastic? You can't tell. Is there sarcasm there? Because it's just the veneer of these words. So you know, when before our DNA was changed, we didn't use veneer. We didn't use these surface words to communicate at all. All that we used was direct, abstract, you know, telepathic communication. It's insight that is pure, like information that does not yet have to go through a system of interpretation of words. So we lose some purity in the transmission every time we have to translate it. And so that's every time we're stepping down on the ladder and bringing it into the physical density world. every time we're doing that, we're losing some level of purity. So by the time an impulse goes from the pure abstract world into the realm of insight, and then into communication, and then through your heart, and then makes it to your conscious intellect, by the time it gets to that level, just to have a thought that you're aware of, it's already been highly distorted. And then when it gets to your emotional centers and is expressed through the physical body, then it gets even more distorted. So this is all about how we live in a distorted funhouse as opposed to living in, a world of perfect mirrors. What is ascension, and what is the flying rainbow lasagna? How does this relate to ascension? Why does this matter? Why are we talking about this now? And we're going to talk about death too. So ascension is the program that we all were intended to run. And when I say we, I mean these organic, multicellular physical bodies. And you know what? I should wrap up one more thing before I get on to ascension. I should say that Christ chakra at the level of the forehead was designed to be an intermediary, like a bridge between the anthropomorphic or human realm and the realm of pure abstraction, bringing humanity into these levels of abstract awareness, where you don't lose your identity. When you become a part of this jazz band, this advanced jazz band, it's not like you stop being you and start being some kind of like robot that is flavorless and has no personal characteristics. No, not at all. Like, you still get to be very much you, but you're you integrating with this much larger structure. And so that means that you might have to mitigate some of your own private selfish needs so that you sound good with the rest of the band. But that's what you want to do, because you don't just want to be one little cell, beating away. You want to be part of a whole organ called the heart that makes the blood flow. So that is right now, this conception of what Christianity is on Earth's surface in human culture is not healthy. There's all of this stuff about the external savior coming to rescue you as an individual, or humanity as a whole, or the planet as a whole. There's all sorts of stuff about the necessity of suffering and the nobility of suffering, that before you get to go to heaven, first you have to be crucified, or die, or have some terrible experience. And I'm really here to tell you that that's not the truth, and that's not what you have to experience. Like, my walking in experience was very traumatic and very unpleasant. However, each one of us can rearrange our DNA. It is like rearranging your body and molecules of your body so that you are no longer shaped like coal and you are now shaped like a diamond. And don't be too literal on this, because the carbon atom itself is basically a hexagonal or six-spoked structure, and that is analogous to your physical structure. And a lot of people equate this with the flower of life, but that's too simplistic, because your higher dimensional body is an eight-lobed or octagonal structure. And what you are really trying to do, what each one of us are really trying to do, is to bridge that gap between these two matrices or arrangement grids. One is based in hexagons and all of those lovely 60-degree angles, and one of them is based in these octagons, and it really turns out to be more 45-degree angles. And I have a whole painting all about this, that is how we use our perception to bridge squares and hexagons. And all the paintings that I make, I'm painting these four-lobed shapes that are actually a slice of something that is eight-lobed. And when you look at it in just the right way, you can see the 6 radial spokes of the flower of life sticking around the edges, but you still have 2 extra spokes, 7 and 8. They stick towards you and away from you. And this represents the higher dimensional planes. So I'm trying to say, the molecules of your cellular body are arranged according to hexagons, 6-sided figures, and 60-degree angles. However, the aspects of self that are non-physical are arranged according to this cube structure, these octagons, 45-degree angles, and these 8-lobed radial shapes. So our job is to be a bridge between these two different levels of perception and reality. And just as that bridge of consciousness on the human realm right now is distorted, this is what we're trying to heal. That the Christian religion, that's why I'm trying to say you don't have to be a Christian in order to utilize the Christ chakra, the aperture on your body that is known as the Christ chakra. That means that you are tuning into Christ consciousness, which is like a jazz band. It's a higher dimensional network of consciousness and awareness that is the birthright of each one of us. It's not only the birthright of people that are born into certain religions or have read certain books or have made certain agreements with any kind of entity. Like, that's another thing. This is not like where you have to make an agreement with an entity, like a lot of people do with their perception or conception of what Jesus Christ is, that's a person that is a non-physical person that you are creating as a real being. Like, you make it real with your belief and then you pledge yourself to it. This is not like that at all. This is like activating, it's like your heart. You know, if you get to be a really well-trained athlete, your heart resonates at a certain frequency. Well, you can do the same thing with your non-physical energy centers. As you cultivate yourself on a non-physical level more and more, you begin to emit these non-physical tones, and one of those non-physical tones is unconditional love. And if you do it enough and you get enough, it's almost like money in your savings account, then you can also activate your higher faculties. And what that looks like when you do it is you start to perceive all of these patterns. And I paint those patterns. So I didn't invent them, I perceive them. And I encourage everyone to learn how to perceive on their own. Don't just take my word for it, please. So I run this class, it's called Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. It is all about how you can cultivate your own energy and transform your own energy field and activate your own higher faculties. And it is like also getting a pencil with an eraser for your DNA. Brief pause. So the flying rainbow lasagna is the shape of non-duality. And this is really a profound concept about how each one of us as an individual can transcend the duality that we've been programmed with biologically, like left eye versus right eye equals depth perception, or our epidermis that creates the duality of inside versus outside, and all of the cell membranes in our body that also create the duality of inside versus outside. But we also face these social and mental constructs like the human ego, that is a social mental construct that creates the identity, who you are versus the world. And this comes down to when I describe my collective of consciousness, and if I don't describe it in the right way, you're like, Aurora, that doesn't sound like heaven. That sounds like a horrible, totalitarian fascist state where I lose my identity. So I have to characterize it in the right way and say, no, you don't have to give up who you are or listen to some external authority figure that says, now lift right arm, now lift left arm, be a slave. It's not like that at all. It is much more about having your own innate divine connection to the great musical composer, the great musical conductor that emanates each one of us. So I am not the person that is telling you what to do like that, unless I dilate my identity to be that conductor composer. Like, that's the source. That's where we all came from. We can each I dilate our identity, or it's like panning out. If you zoom out enough, you're not just this person sitting in this chair. You're the entire human race on the planet. And if you zoom out further, you're the planet, you're all of the planets, and you're also the sun. And if you zoom out even further, you're the entire galaxy. And if you zoom out even further, you are all of the galaxies put together. And if you zoom out even further, then, you are originally the origins of consciousness. And that's what I'm talking about, to dilate your one's personality out to that level. If each one of us dilates our personality out to that level, we achieve unity consciousness, because at that level, there is really only one of us. It's like we have divided our unity self into these various, you could think, shards or mosaic fragments or fractal tiny pieces, fractal microcosmic pieces. And then we are in this other lower dimensional, denser realm where we can interact with one another as if we're individuals. But if we really dilate our personality up to that macrocosmic scale, we begin to see that we are all part of this totality of consciousness. And that is the justification for interventionism on the level that I intervened on in being here as the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, or the first Flying Rainbow Lasagna, to inspire everyone to Flying Rainbow Lasagna with their own bodies, because Earth is not free. We are on the journey to being free. However, Earth is not free, and the lack of freedom here is very offensive to me and many others, because if any aspect of consciousness is not free, then it reduces the tone of the entire group. So let's say if all consciousness is like this bell that I have over here, this resonant instrument, and if I ding this bell, it makes a pretty sound because the bell is shaped right. But if I took a hammer and I smashed in half of that bell so that it was all deformed, when I made the ringing sound, it wouldn't sound pretty anymore. It would sound horrible because half of the bell is smashed in, all right? This is what's going on in our cosmos. Our cosmos is, a network of consciousness, and there are areas of consciousness that are all smashed in. It's like energy that cannot flow in its prescribed patterns. Energy is supposed to flow like, imagine beautiful figure skaters, whirling and swirling in figure eights and doing their pirouettes and gliding along and going to exactly where they're supposed to go. That's what energy is supposed to do in this beautiful, giant, living embroidery of time. The electrons and photons and areas of consciousness and areas of light and awareness are all supposed to be dancing in partnership and whirling and swirling like the beautiful figure skaters and gliding through time unperturbed, uninhibited. If you have perfectly smooth ice, then you glide forward on your journey. However, there are right now many perturbations in the time field, and that's like having choppy ice. We didn't have the Zamboni machine go over the ice, and it's all choppy, and that's making it very difficult for us to glide forward through time perfectly. It's the challenge of meditation. If there were no perturbations, then when you sat down to meditate, you would have no intrusive thoughts. All of those intrusive thoughts are perturbations in the time field, and they don't necessarily originate with us as individuals. They are at large. And the analogy that I use is in a big square tank of water. If that water is perfectly still and you shine a light through it, then there are no shadows. But if it's like, if you go to your regular YMCA, like a pool like that, the water's bouncing and moving in all sorts of unorganized patterns, and it makes that warbly, wavery light and shadow pattern that we associate with water. Those are like the visualization of perturbations of a field. Those perturbations are existing in the mental time field that we are submerged in. That is why it's hard to meditate. When you meditate, you are actually helping to reduce the perturbations of the time field in the same way that Bose brand noise canceling headphones work. These are the headphones you can wear if you're on like a noisy jet flight, because whatever the random noise of the jet engine sends out, your headphones, these high-tech things, send out cancellation waves, and they create neutrality or silence. So this is what the value of meditation is, that you are literally helping to heal the time field by healing the perturbations and not participating in sending out more perturbations when you meditate. And the more that you meditate and the more that you move through your day in a meditative state, which would be called mindfulness, the more that you emit that tone of not being perturbed, the more that you are helping the world. And so this also comes down to like why humans have been perturbed, why our genes were changed. Brief pause. We were not designed to die. We were all designed to ascend. And the difference between death and ascension is just the orientation of our vessel, like that we go through time with. If you are pointed at the membrane of death, it's like pointing your car at a brick wall. You're going to hit the brick wall, you're going to die. And almost the entire time field, all of these timelines end in a brick wall, except for one, that central core timeline. I call it the path of least likelihood. It's the timeline that's at the center of the bullseye. And that is the timeline where if you're aligned with that, instead of dying, hitting the membrane of death and having to circulate back around again and doing the Groundhog's Day thing, instead of that, you get to exit this level of reality and get to the next level of inner refinement. And it's like graduating from this level of the video game of life. But you don't end. The video game doesn't stop. You then take your little video game character avatar and you do the next thing. And you got to learn the lessons of the next place. This is what ascension is. So I'm distinguishing it from the biblical literalist interpretation or anything from the Christian religion that describes rapture, the idea of floating upwards literally, like into a city in the clouds, or the idea of being somehow teleported somewhere else. But I said on this broadcast I'm going to get into what it might look like from the outsider viewpoint, because I don't want anyone to think if they see a loved one or a beloved pet or a beloved tree, if they see that being die, the physical death, I don't want you to think that they have failed, because what might appear from the outsider's observer's viewpoint to be death might actually be ascension from the point of view of the first person experiencer. Because when you ascend, you do not have that death experience that is like a cutting of the thread and an end to continuity of consciousness. So continuity of consciousness is analogous to lucid dreaming. Our daily waking consciousness has a barrier, and it separates us from like our nighttime dreaming consciousness or stream of consciousness, that undefined level of sub or supra consciousness. And the practice of lucid dreaming is self-cultivation to the point where your daily waking consciousness and your nighttime dreaming consciousness are intercommunicative. And when you go to a dreaming, submerged mental state, you can still remember who you are in the daytime when you are not dreaming and when you are not submerged, and your decision-making processes and your ability to form memories are different than if you are not still connected to that daily waking consciousness. And then when you emerge from dreaming, you can remember more of what you experienced. So the meditators of the Far East, like, for example, practitioners of Tibetan Buddhism, they practice continuity of consciousness not just across daytime to nighttime, but across lifetimes, living to dead, back to living. So this is over many generations. It's like a science because it is based in observation. It's not that it is based in scientific apparatuses. Like, there is no machine that is measuring these observations. However, I do classify these Tibetan Buddhists as being scientists in that they are observing the passage of consciousness from generation to generation. And so they're able to chart the flight of a particular, a person when they were born in one body and then they left that body and then they entered into another body, and to begin to learn how to navigate those journeys consciously and effectively. So that's the whole idea of being a karmapa or karmapa, or some of these high lamas. What the word means, like the 17th generation of the karmapa, is that this being has continuity of consciousness going back 17 times, that they died and re-entered the world of being incarnated in a biological body 17 times, and they can remember it. It's like being in the 17th layer of a lucid dream and being able to remember all the way back, like, hey, I was dreaming that I was a fish, and then I fell asleep and I dreamed I was a butterfly, and then I fell asleep and then I dreamed I was this, that, 17 times, okay? So not to get too much more into it, but now you are understanding that, on a higher dimensional level. I say this to people all the time. I'll save you a bunch of money. You've all been everyone. Like, instead of paying someone to do some past life readings for you, like, I'll give you $100. Like, save you $100. You don't have to know who you were in a past life. You were everyone. From the worst sinner or most unrecalcitrant person, the worst mass murderer, maniac that you can imagine, the famous ones, whatever, to the best, most saintly paragon of excellence, and everyone in between. You've been all of those people. We are one photon. This is the idea from physicist Richard Feynman. He was kind of an iconoclast in the 1950s. Very strange, unusual person, and he put forth some new ideas, and one of them was the idea that there's only one photon that exists in all of reality. and that it is constantly moving forward through time and then reversing its journey and moving backwards through time, just like embroidery, making these time loops on the surface of the tapestry of time. And when we are meeting one another here in this level of physical density, what we're really doing is meeting ourself as the photon, but just on a different loop of its journey. And all of this is like a physicist's understanding of profound spiritual truth, that we begin to understand the interconnectivity of consciousness, and that what befalls one portion of consciousness affects all consciousness. What happens to the photon on one loop of its journey affects all of us. This is why there is some level of personal responsibility when you perceive the unfairness or imprisonment of consciousness anywhere that is happening to you on some level. That this is the idea of intervention and interaction, because there's a lot of people have different philosophies on Earth and elsewhere, and there's some people that are non-interventionists. They're kind of saying like, it ain't my job, not my job, not my job, you do your thing, not my job. And it's good to have boundaries, and it's good to be that way. However, I come from a different level of awareness. I'm a photon, I'm the photon, rather, on a different leg of my journey than the non-interventionists. I'm on the part of my journey where I'm like rolling up my sleeves and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to intervene. And they're both all sacred and divine approaches. It's not like there's one that is right and one that is wrong. It's like saying we go through different stages and levels of development. Sometimes we feel like being very active and diving right in and doing things in the music of the symphony of the cosmos. Sometimes you feel like I am compelled to play. I need to play my instrument. I need to do this now. And sometimes you are compelled to rest. And that's a big part of being a musician. You read the cosmic score. You can see sometimes you're supposed to put your instrument down and you rest and you sit quietly and you listen to what everyone else is playing. And that's also part of being a receptive member of the symphony and a member of advanced jazz band. So I'm not casting aspersions upon the beings that are non-interventionists, even though you might feel frustrated sometimes because like you're shaking your fist at the universe. You're like, yo, somebody up there, help me. Help me. People who are literally starving or dying. And that level of frustration is also sacred and divine. That there might be these beings that are on like I joke, sitting on a cloud somewhere. They are sitting on an interdimensional cloud. They are very happy, calm, and peaceful. They are just observing everything from a neutral standpoint, and they don't feel the need to do anything other than just watch and observe and learn. And then there are other beings that are also benign, and they watch and observe, and they're like, you knew something? What's going on down there, that ain't right, and I feel compelled to do something. And so that explains my journey here as Flying Rainbow Lasagne. Brief pause. Because when I perceived what was happening here on Earth's surface, and in particular what was happening to one particular member of the human species that was being horribly, murdered in a psychic attack that was also, you could describe it as a, satanic ritual murder, if we understand and define that Satanism is the use of an exotic or non-terrestrial technology, that it hijacks DNA by, victimizing, like murdering and raping and distorting the consciousness and DNA of organisms, like human beings. And it also can involve animal sacrifice too. So it's not just humans that are being sacrificed, it's also animals, and that planets, the planetary consciousness, a whole planet can be sacrificed. And if we look at the other members of our solar system, we see evidence of that there are dead planets that don't have a healthy magnetosphere. And magnetosphere, that's like, it's like having a pulse. It's like, is the patient alive? Let's check the pulse. If the planet has a magnetosphere, it is alive. But we have a couple of planets in our solar system that don't have one anymore. And that's because they underwent a horrific trauma. And this abuse happens at high levels. So the former occupant of this physical body was, ritually abused using this satanic technology to the point of death. And that was not fair. And I, as this non-physical, abstract, galactic presence, or at the level of the stellar network presence, not a clank metal using technology, using extraterrestrial, but like a being that lives on the star network, I perceived this great injustice, and I said, that is not unfair, that is not cool, I am doing this. And the thing that I did was Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So flying rainbow lasagna is an energy oscillation, like a vibration or a maneuver, or I call it a new dance movement that I did with the DNA and the superstructure of this physical human body. And it's not body snatching or anything like that, even though I have to characterize and set myself apart because I understand that that happens, that there are non-consensual maneuvers that happen down here all the time. And that's essentially what was happening to the person that was in this body, that they were trying to destroy her ego and take over this body. And you have, in those moments, you have options like you can either become pure evil, like join Team Evil, or you can be destroyed. And you can, it would look like dying from the outside. And instead of becoming evil or dying, what happened was I created the shape of non-duality, this flying rainbow lasagna, higher dimensional torus shape with the DNA of this body and also the time field of this body. And that created new options, like the option of no longer dying. So what is ascension? Ascension does not necessarily mean that you float upward and then go and live on a cloud. Ascension does mean that you take the structure, this molecular structure of your body that would be analogous to coal. Coal is like all of the molecules of carbon randomly stuck together in no particular form. And if you take all of those very same molecules and you start to put them together in a formal structure or matrix with no space in between them, like puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly, what you get is a crystalline structure, and that is called a diamond. Each one of us can do this with our physical body. Can take the structure of like the arrangement of spherical cells in your body, like the many, many little round cells that make up your body, and restructure them from this, all over the place, informal, stuck together coal type of structure, and you can put it together and become a pristine crystal. And this has to do with changing your energy field and also changing the dance of your DNA and also changing your connection to higher dimensional consciousness. So all of this healing the false messages about what Christ is. Like part of the false message is that you have to die in order to go to heaven. I'm really trying to get people past this one. Don't have to die in order to go to heaven. What we would define as heaven is actually like a mental state. And you can achieve and embody that mental state while you are still with a physical form, but it means you have to transform your physical form. That's just like saying, you know something, you can run 100 miles a day. Humans do it all the time. I know somebody, a Facebook friend, who runs 100-mile marathons. It's a mega marathon person. You would say, that's not possible. It is totally possible, but it might not be possible with your body in its present format. If you sit on the couch and don't exercise and only eat junk food, that body cannot run 100 miles in a day. But if you undergo this particular specific training regimen and do all the things that this real live person really does, then you can run 100 miles in a day. So things that would be seemingly superhuman or impossible do become possible through the proper training regimen. And one example of this is eating sunlight. So you'd say, Aurora, that's not possible. Like, you can't just live on sunlight. But I would tell all of you, that is the intended design of our bodies. And I didn't say physical bodies because we're supposed to be like semi-physical, the way light is semi-physical. So our ascended format, what we would look like as ascended beings, would be beings that you would still be an individual. However, you would be so connected, like telepathically and through your mentality and perception to everyone else. In the same way, like if you go on Facebook or social media right now, you have a window to the world. I have friends in Australia, I have friends in Africa, I have friends in Europe, I have friends across the entire globe, and that allows me to, have a window on the world anywhere. That is the type of, social media like that is really training wheels for becoming interconnected on the level of humanity. How about on the level of the entire planet? Trees and the ecosystem around my little garden here, outside of my little window, they're not only listening to what's happening in our neighborhood. The trees are in a giant network that communicates across the entire globe. So the trees in my neighborhood know what's going on all the way in Pennsylvania, and, all the way down to South America, and all the way into Alaska. Like, that just makes sense. Of course, the trees need to know about weather patterns that are geographically far distant, but that which will have an impact on this locality. So our basic takeaways from this, episode broadcast here, that we are connected on profound levels. We are connected on levels of time. This being like our births and deaths and everything that happens in between is part of this time field. It's part of this living embroidery, and what we experience and what we do and what we send out and how we act towards others has an impact on others. So the actions of your life don't just affect you, they affect other people, and taking responsibility means that you're taking responsibility for what you do and for what you send out to others and for what you receive. That is part of understanding being an interventionist. Like, I'm not usually a terrestrial being. I'm down here, I'm like jumping in, I'm diving in, I'm doing stuff, I'm having an impact. So I have to take responsibility for all the things that I do, the words that I say, and the impact of those words. So I have to choose my words really carefully. I can't just sling about nonsense and send it out there and be like, that's okay, I'm painting in broad strokes. Like, no, this really matters, because if one does not take responsibility for the ideas that one sends out, then it's like saying, I put food on your plate and I put that plate in front of you, and it's not good food for you to eat. Like, all the things that I put on the plate of these broadcasts, these are all very perfectly made little morsels. Like when you make a sushi, you make everything perfect and everything, that you just take that morsel and you can eat it. There's no bones. You don't have to pick around. It's perfectly made. That's how I try to choose my words and send out these broadcasts. Impeccably, like with pure intent, and really carrying the meaning of what I'm trying to send out, because I understand that the energy we send out, our thoughts, our intentions, our emotions, and our words. Words are very magical. Words are very powerful. These have an impact on shaping reality. And this is part of being in advanced jazz band. It's part of being part of the cosmic symphony. And it's part of understanding that we're in a living time field. And how do we extend the life of that time field? How do we keep the time field alive? So one of the things that I don't espouse about Christianity as it is taught, it's not just Christianity, it's the death cult. Any of these religions that talk about the necessity of death, when really our bodies were made not to die. We were made to be born, to transfer our stellar consciousness into a physical form, and to live in the physical density still connected to the stars, not to be cut off and then walk around bumping into walls and not know who we are. We're supposed to still know who we are, be connected to the stars, and while we're alive, eat nothing but pure sunlight. Like, our world changes profoundly when we get back to being light eaters. And then when you're done with having a physical experience, physicality is kindled as fuel for the mentality to go to the next realm, to the next level of the video game, quote unquote. So all of this I'm trying to get across. If you have a beloved person or animal or tree in your life, and if you saw them die the physical death, it doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't ascend or that they weren't able to kindle their physicality into a higher dimensional state. Because if you do it right, you don't leave anything behind. Don't leave behind any evidence. There's no body. There's no pile of goo, there's no decomposition, there's no bad smell. When the trauma in Atlantis, when death was first invented, was that people saw their loved ones going from being beautiful, alive people to being corpses. And the first day, a corpse is still relatively beautiful, but after that, it's not beautiful anymore. It does not look like your loved one. And they were horribly traumatized by seeing their formerly beautiful, perfect loved ones devolve and degrade and begin to decompose, and see their lips turn black and then see them start to rot. That was not the intention for what our bodies were meant to do in terms of changing state. Decomposition is a very slow way of changing state, or going from a solid to a gas and plasma and energy form. So decomposition is the slow way of doing it. Then there's cremation. That's if you add energy with fire. then you are going from a solid directly to heated gases and plasmas and ash transformed into a different state. You can, instead of fire, physical fire, you can use consciousness as the transformative ray that makes the physical layer of the body transform into its higher dimensional state. And this is what everybody did in the antediluvian, world of pre-corruption, before our physical bodies were changed, before our genetics were changed, before our minds were hijacked. So I give out these broadcasts in order to like give out the original boot up discs. Like if your computer becomes corrupted, you have to reinstall the operating system. This is like reinstall from the original discs. But we don't just have to go back to who we were in Atlantis. We can transcend those limitations. But just to remember that your body has within it that potential to be a pure light eater and to transcend death. We were not made to die the physical death. We were all made to take our consciousness with continuity. That means remembering who you were, but you're not clinging to who you were. And here's the difference. Like, you might be able to remember who you were, as a 6-year-old child, or remember who you were as a freshman in college or high school. But you don't have to cling to those identities. Like, clearly, your favorite object now as an adult is probably not your stuffed panda bear or whatever was your toy as a child, You're a different person now. You don't cling to who that was, but you remember who that was. And you now have a different set of ambitions and requirements and needs than you did when you were 6 years old. You've changed your level, and your transformation means that you now have like different aspirations and different goals and different requirements. That's what ascension is like. Right now, we have all of the aspirations and requirements and needs and goals and desires of the biological body that eats food. So when I first came into this body, I was trying to do nothing but eat sunlight, and I didn't understand the requirements of food. Now, it took me a long time to get adjusted. I've been here for like about 15 years. Now I understand food, and I also understood when you get into this body, you get the appetites for sexuality and procreative sex and reproduction. The cells of the body say, I want to reproduce, and this is one way to do it. And that is all part of being in this body. So food and reproduction, like sexual expression, that's part of being in a body. And when we go into this next level of development, that's like when you have transformed from being a child into being an adult, you don't want your teddy bear anymore. When you transform, when you ascend, you don't necessarily want to go out and eat hamburger and french fries anymore. You want to consume food in a different level. And you want intimacy, but in a different level than human, biological, physical, procreative sex. I didn't even get to talk about what ascension looks like from the outside. But even though someone appears to have died, they can still be on their journey of ascending. And I'll talk more about that next week also. Thank you so much.